Okay, so let's go over lab a little bit, as in the point. I feel like we got caught up a bit. I really think a lot of people focused on or got stuck on the clock or the weather. Um, but like when we do these labs, keep in mind like the name of the lab, right? The context API lab. So like if you get stuck on like something that's not actually like it's like in the lab, but it's not really the point of the lab, just move on. You know, the point of the lab is to play with context. That's the whole point. So her feed says, I dreamt of Carol Baskin. She's been ruining my dreams, that Carol Baskin. But no, I did not. Okay, let me share my screen. Let's break it down like a clown. Okay, you can see my screen. Nod if you can. Yep. Okay. Awesome. So this is my context API lab. It's just a brand new Create React app. Henry's checking out his glasses. Yes, I too look at the screen like this. Okay. Um, so let's just quickly build out a couple things. So I guess we had a couple pages. So I need to install React Router DOM. All right, so once I've got React Router DOM, I can set this up to have a multi-page application, and I can do that in my index. So I can just import our browser router. And I'm just gonna call this router, if I like to, from React Router DOM. Okay, so we have a couple different pages here. Let's wrap our whole app in our router. Whoops. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, we've got our router. It's probably going to complain because we're still loading it, but I'm going to worry about that just a little bit later. Let's build out our components. So we talked about having a nav bar. So I'm going to say components. Let's create a nav bar. I'm going to call this navbar.js. Let me see. I want to make sure I can see the chat in case anyone throws a question in there. Okay. And so let's go ahead and import React from React.
Corey,
Yep.
in the index.js, you don't delete the React strict mode.
Nah.
Okay.
It hasn't. I don't really know what that. Honestly, that's like just kind of like seemed to randomly showed up one day for me.
Okay.
And I don't really know what it does, but it hasn't seemed to get in my way yet. So I've just been leaving it.
Okay.
I'm going to also import nav link from our React Router DOM. Okay. And I'm going to go back to our other console so I can see if there's any instant crashes. And I will export default this nav bar so it doesn't take in anything. And I'm just going to go ahead and return a nav link. Okay, and in here, let's just create a couple links. So I'll say nav link to, I'll just make this slash for home. I'll make that an exact route. And this will say home. And we'll make another one that just says, I'm just gonna say clock. Okay, and I'm not gonna do the other one because it's not really what's crucial. I just wanna make sure we get what's crucial. I don't wanna set up an API right now. Okay, and let's go ahead and import that into our app. Import navbar from /components/navbar. I'm going to get rid of lab part, and I will just make it say navbar. Great. So if we go over to our app now, we have home and clock, which changes our route. We can see it working at the top. It's really hideous, but it's working for right now. I also don't like that I didn't stay consistent, so I'm just gonna do that. Okay, so navbar is, for now, we'll say done. Index.js is done. Let's also just make a quick home component. So we'll say new file, and we'll just call this home.js. Export default our home. We'll import React from React. This will just return an H1. But I'll put it in a div for fun, and I'll make this an H1, and it will just say like React context lab home, and let's import that into our app. Home, and it doesn't know where to get it, so just make it home. Great. I accidentally made it capital. Okay. All right, so we're just kind of setting up the skeleton here. We have our home. Still is going to show up on our clock because we don't have this inside of a route, so we can go ahead and handle that now. So let's go ahead and import. I'm going to call this route and switch because I only want to hit one, and we'll get that from our React router. Right, and so in our switch statement, we always want our nav bar, so I'm not going to include that in our switch, but I will put our home in there, but I'll move that in this, and we're going to have these routes that says to, or how does this work? Path, sorry, it's been a minute, right? And this will be just slash, and we'll say exact, because we only want to show exactly then, and we'll put our home in there. Okay, so now we've got our home there, and when we look here, we have, when we're on clock, it's not there, but when we click on home, it is there. So great, we got a little thing going on. I'm also just gonna build out my clock real quick. So let's just do that. Clock.js. Import React from React. Export default function, and I'm just gonna say return, and let's pretend I want this in a div as well. Maybe I would have put this in a main or something. And I'll just do an H1, where I'll say clock component, right? Okay. And let's import that. So this is going to be essentially the same thing again. So I'm just going to duplicate it. Whoops. And this will be clock. And our path will be slash clock. Okay. Let's also import that because it needs that. And we'll make that clock. And we should be good. We've essentially set up the skeleton of the app. So our home, React context home lab, clock component. So we go, great. Okay. So let's focus on styling this just a touch, yeah? So I'm gonna make CSS folder so I can get some stuff in here. CSS, and let's make a nav.css. So I'll say navbar.css. And I just know I just want to style the nav element directly. I'm going to say display flex, justified content, space around. Let's import that into our navbar. Stop me if you have any questions yet. And we'll just go ahead and import that. So ./css/navbar. I think I capitalized that. CSS. And we go, okay, great. We've styled that at least so it's a little bit more attractive, like whatever. But this looks a lot like a light mode, dark mode. All right, so the first thing we should be really focusing on here is how are we going to use our context API? Okay, so how do we do it? Well, we can start with creating a context. Now, I could create my context somewhere else and wrap the whole app in this provider, or I could even just create an app. So I'm going to start with the most simple thing first and move backwards. So let's say, well, I'll keep this state here. So I say use state. And so I'm going to have like a theme. So I'm going to call this const theme. And we also have our set theme. And I'll say that that's equal to our use state. And I'm going to set this in light mode first.
Does
All right,
use
this
state have to be destructured?
Sorry?
Line 1 use state is not destructured.
Oh, nice catch, Ashia. Thank you. I do need to destructure that from React. Great catch. Right, so I've got my use state. I need to be able to toggle my state. So I'm going to go ahead and write that function. So I'll call this toggle theme. And this will, for now, not take in any arguments. And I can just say like, hey, I want to set my theme to if theme is equal to light, I want to make it dark. Otherwise, keep it as go to light. Right? There's nothing wrong with that code. This will toggle the theme. So we can go, oh, okay, great. We've got this theme now that we could pass in. Now, I could just pass them all in here, right? But then I'm just passing props, and that's not the point of the project. The point of the project is to use context. So let's go ahead and use that as well. So I'm going to say use context. So the first thing I need to do is create my context. I'm going to export it too. So I'm going to export. I'm going to call this theme. I'll capitalize it. Theme context. And this is going to be equal to use context or create context. I'm sorry. My mistake, right? I need to create the context first. And I'm not going to pass in a default here, but I could just put light. Maybe I will, just for fun, right? But this is only going to get it if we try to access the theme, and it's not in there. Otherwise, right, I can just wrap everything potentially in here. I could say theme context dot provider. Oops. And then I could put everything inside. Let me just in a little bit. So now I have created the context of these. I have to add a value to pass in what I want to be available. And I'm going to say, I want my theme available as well as my toggle theme function. It doesn't like something that I'm doing because I'm not writing const. Okay, so we've got this. Let's go ahead and see if we can write something to toggle. So inside of our nav, now we have to bring in use context because I'm actually going to want to use something from my context. And we have to import also the context that we want. So I'm going to call this, I have to destructure this theme context, and I'm going to grab this from app for now. So then inside of here, I can just pull something out. So I can say const, and let's go ahead and say toggle. I think I called it toggle theme. Let's double check to make sure. Toggle theme. And I want that from our use context and pass in the context that I want to use it from, theme context. So now, if I add this button, I can add a button. And I'm just going to call this, I'm going to say toggle theme. And on click, we can go ahead and fire this function. Yeah, so I can just go ahead and write toggle theme, like so. So I have this toggle theme. Now we can't see if anything's working right now because I don't have any debuggers. And I don't think I have my React Dev Tools open. So let's just go ahead and add some small styling based off of this theme. So I could give this a class name. Okay, and I'm gonna say this class name is gonna just be my theme, let's say. So I'm taking toggle theme, but let's say I also want my theme out of here. So I'll say my theme is going to be my class name. So I go, oh, okay, great. I'll go into my app.js here where I will go into my S here where I'll say, okay, so my nav bar is going to be styled like this. And anything that's .light, like any A tags, let's say, inside. Or how do I really want to do this? Well, for now, I'll just say background is white. And let's make color black. Otherwise, if it's at dark, I'll just make my background black and my color white. Right, so I'm just inverting it. So if we go here, I should be able to click on my toggle theme and it changes the color of everything. Now these are staying purple because these are actually links, but we can see that it's working. Right, so hopefully you got this far because this is kind of like the minimum requirement, although I would have to add this type of styling to my home as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So from home, I'm gonna import use context. I'll import the context. So I'm gonna say theme context, and I'm gonna get that from our app. So /app. Okay. And I also want to be able to use our context. Now, I don't have any interest in toggling from here. So I'm only going to take out our theme. And that's going to be from use context. And I'll pass in our context. Theme context. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a class name for now, and this will just be, again, our theme. Let's go ahead in our CSS and make a home file. So we'll say home.css that I will also import into our home. Import /css/home.css. And we know that this is the theme here, right? So this is either going to be the word light or dark, and I want to style this h1. Let's pretend I give this its own class, though. Let's say I call this dot home or home header or something. If I did that, I'll do it like I'll stay consistent. Home header. I like writing like that. In my home CSS, I can go ahead and make like So let's say I want my background to still be, I think it's still going to be black. I probably already have this, but color white. That's like its default. I could probably probably do this for my whole app.
I
So
think
I
you're
only
doing
have to
the
do this
opposite.
one
The
time.
light,
What?
I think you're doing the opposite. The light background has to be white and the color has to be black.
Yeah, you're right. Good catch, Ashia. Right, I've definitely did the opposite. Okay, and then let's say I wanted to style specific H1 tags or something. I could say dot light, and I could like do my dot home header. And so anything that's in light and then call the home header is the font will be green or something. Like I'll make this green. Anything that's dark and home header, I'll make it pink. Something like that. And so now we should see something different in our home component. And we say, okay, we have the theme. And when I click toggle theme, we get both of those components change over. Don't know what the space is in here. The space is in our app. So we probably want to make our class name there as well. We'll make this, I'll just make this theme as well. Let's see if that, I don't really like that awkward space. Okay, and we toggle our theme. And we go, oh, okay, looks good, right? I mean, it's working. Now, of course, my HTML is only like really tiny, so I probably should be adding a CSS reset and making it, stretching it out so my HTML and my body all have this view height of 100%. Right, I could do that as well, just to make things larger. So I could say like height is 100 VH, and I could, or 100%. Let's see if that worked. Anyway, that worked. And body could be a height of 100 VH, and our root could have that as well. Height is 100 VH, and then our we can also add that to our like dark class or something. Dark is height of 100%. Right, so then we have like our whole page. It's not particularly hard. That's just something I'd have to mess around with that I don't really feel like doing, because the whole point is context, right? Okay, so I could do the same thing again in my clock. Now, if I want to make this potentially a little bit cleaner, I can make a providers component. I'm going to make a folder called providers. And so inside of here, I'll make a new file. I'm going to call this theme provider.js. And so my theme provider is going to be pretty much everything that I was doing in my app. So let's go ahead and import React from React, export const theme context is create context, and maybe I'll just have it default to light if somebody tries to test this thing. And then I'll export default. This takes in props, and this is just going to return and this is just going to do our theme context dot provider, and inside is going to be our props dot children. This needs to have a value, and our value will be our theme and our toggle theme, which I'm gonna copy from this code. So I'm gonna get rid of that and instead put it here. Okay, so now we should have all those things passed in. But we just have to import things correctly because our nav bar is looking for from our app, but this is no longer in our app. This is in our providers / theme provider, and our home is doing the same thing. So / provider / theme provider. And this is coming from our app.js, where it's complaining because we no longer want our theme context here. We don't want this theme provider. Instead, we want theme provider is what we called it. Like so, which we have to import as well. Yep, theme provider from / providers / theme provider. And we have to use that. So we don't have access to it here. We don't have access to this theme right here. So for now, I'm not, I don't really feel like dealing with that right now. There's nothing in there. It shouldn't be an issue. There's some error somewhere here. Oh.
I think it's your theme. Yeah.
Okay, so we go back and the code still works. Why do we have this weird space? I think it just has to do with it's because we don't have a CSS reset. But if I put in a CSS reset, there would be no spaces here. And I would have complete control over what the app is. Right, so we didn't do it for the clock component. Let's go ahead and just add that. So import our theme. So we'll say theme context from .. provider / theme provider. Let's go ahead and use context. So I'm just gonna say const. I'm gonna take out our theme. And that's gonna be from our use context. And we're gonna pass in our theme context and my class name here is gonna be our theme. Right, so now if I really want to, I can style that the same way, or I could do clock.css. I'm just gonna say it's pretty much the same as home styling. So I'm just gonna grab that. And add that into our clock CSS. But instead of these, I'll just write H1 because that's all that's in our clock for right now. And yeah, that I just import that. /clock.css. Right, and so now our clock component also has this toggle. So we're able to control multiple components. We're not passing props and we're using our so that's really as deep as you needed to go. This is like the goal. I mean, obviously with more time, you would continue styling and make this look better, and you would actually make the actual little widgets like the clock and whatnot. But the real goal of the context lab was to make something just with this kind of behavior. Any questions on any of that?
Real quick, the only thing for me, in my opinion, I feel like the more components you're gonna add into this, right? The more use context you're gonna be calling. So why not do it somewhere where? Because me personally, in my project, I did it in a nav bar.
You did what in the nav bar?
Uh, I did a toggle effect, right? And then I figured since like in the app.js, the nav bar is not in the switch, inside the switch, right?
Right.
I could just use that. I could just use the nav bar component and like do all the, the toggle things in the nav bar. That way, when you
So I hear you, but I don't think that makes as much intuitive sense to think that all of my logic for the theme of my application would exist in the nav bar. I
okay,
think toggling the theme definitely should exist in the nav bar, as well as the theme being updated. But yeah, you're right. A lot of components will use, every time we make a component, we'll be using this context. But that's somewhat of our point of our context, is that we're creating like something that's going to be almost globally used. And so instead of passing props to all these components, no matter how deep they may be, we can just grab straight from our context.
got it.
Cool. What, any other questions on this? All right, let's take the poll then. Let's see how we're feeling. How are we feeling about this example of context? How are we doing? Make sense? Not make sense? Right? Not every context needs to go into having reducers and all of that. It can clean it up a bit, but if it's something of just as like toggling a theme, probably don't need it. Seems like overkill. Okay, so that's a good amount of votes. This is where we're at. We're at a beautiful bell curve from 3 to 5. Pretty much, yeah, like the classic bell curve, where 50% is within one standard deviation. Each standard deviation would be within 5. So that's awesome. Okay, if there's any questions though, we can hit them. Otherwise, we can have a longer lunch and come back at 2, and we'll talk about Redux Toolkit. But I'll hang out here for a few minutes in case there's any questions. Okay.